friends. Today starts a worship series that will take us through to the end of the summer. We'll be taking a closer look at the Psalms with the company of Walter Brueggemann's little book, Spirituality of the Psalms. For a little background, Walter Brueggemann was a UCC-ordained Hebrew Bible scholar, deeply faithful, pastoral, and prophetic in his witness. And he died just last month on June 5th at age 92. His memorial service will be later this week. Now, I never studied with Brueggemann, but I heard him preach once, very early in my ministry. He was preaching to a huge room full of preachers in a very large church in Minneapolis. And my friends and I were lucky enough, or maybe just late enough, to get a spot very near the front of the sanctuary. Now, I couldn't tell you now what the subject of the sermon was, though it's a good bet that he preached on something from the Hebrew Bible, probably a prophet, maybe Jeremiah, the broken-hearted prophet, the way he was really speaking to the preachers in the room. I just know that I wept through much of it openly, tears just streaming down my face, as he spoke a word of life into me and so many others there. I was close enough to the front, I'm pretty sure he saw me crying. And later that day, I had it confirmed, not because anyone said anything, but I got to cross paths with him on the sidewalk. And it was between conference events, and without saying a word, our eyes met, and he just twinkled at me. You know, you have that moment of recognition, and you know that you're seeing and being seen. I share that little story because I want you to understand something of the humanity of the scholar whose work will set the table for our spirits these next few weeks. More than an academic exercise, I think the why behind this series is made explicit in that quote that started our service today, that poets exist so the dead may vote, and they do that in the Psalms. They vote for faith, but in voting for faith, they vote for candor, for pain, for passion, and finally for joy. Their persistent voting gives us a word that turns out to be the word of life. As we live through a time that continues to be deeply disorienting, I think sinking our roots down deep into the best of our tradition, into the words of the dead who wrestled with God and life in ways that were candid, painful, passionate, joyful, and faith-filled, can be the spiritual sustenance we need to move from death to life. So let's listen for words of life in Psalm 15. Who has the right to enter your tent, Yahweh, or to live on your holy mountain? Those who conduct themselves with integrity and work for justice, who speak the truth from their heart and do not use their tongues for slander, who do not wrong their neighbors and cast no discredit on their friends, who look with contempt on the corrupt but honor those who revere Yahweh, who always keep their promises even when it hurts, who don't demand interest on loans and cannot be bribed to exploit the innocent. If people do these things, nothing can ever shake them. Here ends the reading. May God help us to hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Will you pray with me, please? Now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Friends, before looking more closely at the psalm for today, I want to give you kind of a 30,000-foot overview of Brueggemann's reading of the Psalms as a whole, because I think it has an insight that can transform how we read them and how we are in relationship with them in their wholeness, rather than cherry-picking verses. Brueggemann posits that most Psalms fall into one of three categories: Psalms of orientation, Psalms of disorientation, and Psalms of new or reorientation. Psalms of orientation, quote, describe a happy, blessed state in which the speakers are grateful for and confident in the abiding, reliable gifts of life that are long-standing from time past and will endure for time to come. Life as reflected in these psalms is not troubled or threatened, but is seen as the well-ordered world intended by God, end quote. These psalms don't have surprises, they don't have fear, just faith and trust that things are the way they are because God made them so and God made them good. So that's Psalms of orientation. Psalms of disorientation give voice to the fact that life is not always well ordered, right? Quote, life is also savagely marked by incoherence, a loss of balance, and unrelieved symmetry, end quote. Psalms of disorientation are often called complaint psalms because they complain to God about fear and threat and trouble, quote, insisting that such experiences of disorder are a proper subject for discourse with God, end quote. They require us to go on a journey of transformation to find God, faith, and ourselves changed by the experience of threat, trouble, fear, and the unexpected chaos of life. Psalms of disorientation are not very fun, and often pieces of them are totally redacted from the Revised Common Lectionary, so we don't have to spend time with them if we don't want to. So they're in the Bible, but we don't necessarily always desire to turn to them. And then Psalms of new or reorientation, they're the result of people and poets who have gone through the gauntlet of disorientation, given voice to it honestly, been changed by it, and now find themselves, quote, surprised by grace when there emerges a new possibility that is inexplicable, wrought by the inscrutable power and goodness of God, end quote. I think most folks, when we're going through a time of disorientation, we're like, let's get to the reorientation and let's get there fast, please, please. Where is the surprising grace? Where is the inexplicable possibility for us? Now, these categories, as Brueggemann lays them out, they're not a hierarchy, but kind of a taxonomy of experience. I think we need all of them, the free, raw, candid expressions of faith they offer, as a reflection of the fullness of the lives that we live, oriented, disorienting, and surprised by grace, finding a path toward a new orientation, a new awakening of life, graced by God. Brueggemann suggests that when we stay stuck in one form of psalm or one form of being in faith, if we're afraid to acknowledge the world as it is, or if we get numb to or in denial of the way that systems that benefit us are causing harm to others, we end up cutting ourselves off from God, from grace, and from the path of life. Giving these pretty cursory descriptions, what category, friends, would you guess that the psalm we read today fits into? And I'll read a little bit more of it again. Who has the right to enter your tent, Yahweh, or to live on your holy mountain? Those who conduct themselves with integrity and work for justice, who speak the truth from their heart and do not use their tongues for slander, who do not wrong their neighbors and cast no discredit on their friends, who always keep their promises even when it hurts. If people do these things, nothing can ever shake them. What does that sound like? Orientation, disorientation, or reorientation? Like, just throw out a guess. It could be a reorientation. Yeah. Well, so Tom says reorientation, and Brueggemann even says in his book, like, how do you tell the difference between orientation and reorientation? It's like, well, have you been through it? Brueggemann does call this one a psalm of orientation because it's a Torah song. It's based on the laws set out in Torah, gifts from God to the community of Israel on how best to live. And it sounds like it's being sung by someone who believes that the world makes sense, someone who believes in God's justice, somebody who is more or less untroubled by life. If you follow the rules and do what's right, you'll be able to enter the tent on God's holy mountain. And it is a beautiful vision of how best to live and what a well-ordered life, respecting the order and justice set out by God, can mean for individuals and community. If people do these things, nothing can ever shake them. And doesn't it feel good when we can sing a psalm of orientation honestly? All feels right with the world, and we can trust that we are in the flow of what is good. It's kind of that whistling happy song that we listen to with the kids. But Brueggemann also cautions readers who cling only to psalms of orientation in a naive way. He says that often psalms of orientation, the simple songs and faith of people who feel #blessed, look at how good my life is, as though life is going just as it should, and they're getting good things because they earned and deserve them. These psalms can function to bless the status quo, bless the privileged, and ignore the plight of those who are struggling under the current social and economic system. If we're not careful, psalms and prayers and religions of orientation can serve to perpetuate the viewpoint that if someone else isn't getting good things, it's because they didn't work for them and they don't deserve them. Or if someone is getting bad things, it must be because they're a bad person. They shouldn't have been speaking Spanish or come to this country with their parents as a baby or lost their green card. There's a danger here of trying to make the world fit your worldview rather than responding honestly, being curious about and surprised by, and sometimes deeply pained by, the world as it is. Psalm 15 can be read encouragingly if people are living in ways outlined here: integrity, truth, justice, honoring God. But it could also serve to exacerbate despair when there's doublespeak or denial, pretending that all is right with the world when it's not. How might a more candid conversation with God, a more candid version of Psalm 15, speak of what it sees going on in the world? I was asking myself that question and gave it a shot, adapting what's there with what we might intersperse, letting this psalm of orientation lead to a psalm of disorientation. Who has the right to enter your tent, Yahweh, or to live on your holy mountain? Those who conduct themselves with integrity and work for justice. But where are they, O God? And where are you? Why have you left us to those who speak no truth from their hearts and only use their tongues for slander? We miss the days of integrity and the reflections of your justice, Holy One. We long to trust our neighbors and embrace old friends. And yet the corrupt are revered, rejoicing while the poor go hungry. Where are the ones who keep their promises even when it hurts? Who don't demand interest on loans and cannot be bribed to exploit the innocent? The sick wander uncared for while the corrupt profit from their medical debt. Does everything have a price? Is nothing sacred? We need your presence, O God. We feel shaken and would that you restore us again. Uphold all who are standing for justice, all who are standing in the breach. Befriend all who feel lonely and forgotten. Open our hearts to be neighbors. We long to sing your praise, but some days there is sawdust in our mouths. Return to us, O God. Restore us again. From our lips to God's ears. Amen.